I'm Ben C.
I'm Dr. V, the medical legal guys.
My name's Ben Martin. I'm a lawyer in Dallas, Texas, and we have cases all across the country. And one of the types of cases that we handle and we work up are what I would call the acute birth trauma cases. Those are the cerebral palsy cases. Those are the cases where you've got hypoxic events that lead to lower oxygen, leads to brain damage in these kids.
Even childhood schizophrenia is associated with hypoxic brain damage because that affects the dopamine centers, which leads to some of the psychosis. So this is interesting litigation. The science has evolved to be able to show particular findings in the brain that can identify hypoxic brain damage.
So one of the elements of a case, in every one of these cases, the future harm is there, right? You don't cure profound cerebral palsy. You don't cure autism. There are treatments for each and for both, but you don't cure. So what that leads to is what we call in law damages, right? What are the future damages? One is that angst, that mental anguish, that pain and suffering, that type of injury to that child. And some instances, and in some states, recoverable is the angst and the mental anguish of the parents, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is crunching numbers, and it's crunching numbers with respect to what is this child going to need? What is this family going to need in the future to help defer the cost of raising this child with respect to the injuries, right? I mean, some of these folks are really in need of, as Dr. V said, 24-hour care, depending on the severity and level of the condition. Some are not, but there's a full range. There is such a thing as minimal birth injuries, right? There is a more minimal levels of future care needed. And then there are some that go into the tens of millions of dollars. And those things are all put together as part of the case so that it can be evaluated complexity and its incompleteness.
Right. So, as the case progresses, that's when, we hire the pediatric neurology expert, the pediatric physiatry expert to be able to delineate the care that the child will need to their life expectancy. Many of these children develop scoliosis and they need to have scoliosis surgery because if you have brain damage, your spine will develop neurogenic scoliosis, and that will interfere with breathing. So these children at age 14 are getting major spine surgery. These are serious medical conditions. They get worked up. We have experts in neonatology, experts in pediatric neurology. We have labor and delivery nursing experts, have OBGYN experts, and these are important cases and very expensive to bring, but we need to bring these cases.
And there are also the experts that are crunching the numbers, and economists, for instance. They're looking at this future care, and that future care is determined by expertise of folks called life care planners, certified life care planners, people who have gone to school for years in order to become proficient in the knowledge of what it takes with respect to a child's injuries, what it's going to take for that lifetime care, crunching those numbers. And what they're going to do is make a damage model, a damages model, meaning a model of those economics so that we can evaluate and that the courts can evaluate these cases and that the jury can evaluate these cases when they go to trial.
So wait and see, the wait and see aspects of taking care of a child who has had a complicated delivery, neonatal encephalopathy, that is changing. And, so there's 3 grades of neonatal encephalopathy related to hypoxic encephalopathy. There's mild, moderate, and severe. And historically, only the severe and moderate neonatal encephalopathies would get therapeutic cooling. Recent study showed that children with mild who aren't therapeutically cooled because they don't meet the therapeutic cooling criteria, they perform worse that were therapeutically cooled.
There's been a study on that, and we've talked about the study at great length, where these children will compare to the children that had the therapeutic cooling, the ones that did not versus the ones that did. And what these studies are called are clinical trials, right? There are different types of them. But what this particular study did was to compare these two groups so that we now know that therapeutic cooling works if it's used. And now doctors who are able to have the knowledge that they should have now to therapeutically cool these children, they're going to have a better result in the long term if they use this technology that is now known to work.
It's interesting. So now the centers, the major centers they're identifying categories of severity of presentation at birth. And then at 2 years, they're being graded in terms of how they're performing from a developmental standpoint. So that they have all this data now to be able to identify treatments that work. Therapeutic cooling is the only treatment that helps protect the brain, and more kids who are born hypoxic are getting therapeutically cooled because the risk of therapeutic cooling is really, it's not that risky of a procedure.
Non-existent as to the risk of therapeutically cooling a child. You're not going to injure a child if you use therapeutic cooling.
Correct. So Ben Martin, if you were to code right now and I were to, do CPR and I revive him and he goes to the ICU, he would be therapeutically cooled. So people who have cardiac arrest that are revived, they're getting therapeutically cooled. Adults are, and so this has been around. This is the standard of care, and wait and see attitude to see how the baby does. No. So when we're talking about autism, there are two factors that cause autism, okay, that are known, okay? Hypoxic brain damage and genetics. There's been a lot of legal opinions, expert reports regarding Tylenol and the association with autism. And from my review of the literature and the meta-analysis and the gobs of data and articles regarding this association of Tylenol and autism, the relative risk of the articles show that it's about 1.34. So the questions of being exposed to autism generally won't even be admissible because it lacks a certain level of confirmation. So do you want to talk about relative risk?
Sure. So relative risk. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called epidemiology, what the cause of those diseases are. And the way it works is that there are different levels of studies that are done to make a determination as to the incidence, whatever the illness or disease is in the population. One of the things that's important is to determine what is the relative risk of a particular drug or medical device or other non-pharmaceutical cause of a condition, right? It's in every particular area of science, every particular area of epidemiology. They do these studies. And when you get to a relative risk, you're actually putting a number to what are the chances I'm going to get cancer if I smoke versus somebody who does not. The heart of what we do that is the Depo-Provera litigation, where it has been determined in the British Medical Journal publication, March of 2024, that if you took or were injected with Depo-Provera, a birth control injection, the only birth control injection that exists, there is a 5.5 times relative risk. If you have developed a meningioma, which is a type of brain tumor, 550% chance greater that your Depo-Provera has caused your brain tumor as opposed to one who does not have Depo-Provera. That's a pretty broad and pretty simple way to say it, but that's a relative risk.
So autism 1.34 is what we're kind of seeing in the literature, okay? I'm not an epidemiologist, but 1.34 is kind of a problem.
We're not saying that in some instances that Tylenol taken during pregnancy may not have something to do with autism, have some relationship, some association with autism, but it's a lesser relative risk than say something like the Depo-Provera. So it's kind of early in the game to say one way or the other, but certainly relative risk is important in any one of these epidemiological issues.
If you have a child with low level autism who had a complicated delivery, was in the NICU, and is looking at 24-hour care, was there a negligent delivery? And is there diagnostic evidence of a hypoxic brain damage? So we're available. Again, I take first call, and then shortly thereafter, there will be an OBGYN discussing the birthing process, and then we order records.
So, look, if you have a situation where you have a child or you know someone, a loved one, a friend who has had a child and there was a complicated delivery, it might be worth taking a minute and chit chatting with them and letting them know that there may be some help for them, some help and some answers. Help and help being an answer.